I cannot believe you are doing this, Luca, Catherine Romano whispered, her voice breaking as she stared at the divorce papers her husband had just placed on the dining table. I just came from the doctor yesterday. Yesterday, Luca. And you have already had these drawn up? Luca Marchetti stood by the window of their penthouse, overlooking Boston Harbor, his back to his wife, his shoulders rigid beneath his tailored Armani suit. He was 44 years old, built like a man who worked out daily, his dark hair perfectly styled, his presence commanding, even in silence. When he finally turned to face her, his expression was cold, detached, the face of a man who had already made his decision and would not be swayed by emotion. This is not about timing, Catherine, he said, his voice flat and emotionless. This is about reality. You have stage 3 breast cancer. The doctors gave you a 6 to 5% survival rate with treatment. That means there is a 35% chance you die. Those are not odds I am willing to bet my future on. Your future, Catherine repeated, disbelief flooding through her. Luca, we have been married for 9 years. 9 years. I stood by you through federal investigations. I kept my mouth shut when your enemies threatened me. I loved you when everyone else feared you. And the moment I get sick, you are walking away? You stood by me because that was your role as my wife, Luca said, moving to the bar and pouring himself a scotch. You did what was expected, but I did not sign up to be married to a cancer patient. I did not agree to spend the next year, maybe longer, watching you deteriorate. Watching you lose your hair, get weak, become a shadow of the woman I married. So that is what this is about, Catherine said, anger cutting through her shock. My appearance. The way I will look during treatment. You are divorcing me because I might not be pretty enough for you anymore. Do not simplify this, Luca said, taking a drink. This is about my life, my business, my reputation. People in my world see weakness as an invitation. If they see me with a sick wife, if they see me distracted by hospitals and treatments and emotional turmoil, they will think I am vulnerable. They will move against me. Then protect yourself, Catherine said, her voice rising. Hire more security. Be more careful. But do not throw away our marriage because you are afraid of looking weak. It is already done, Luca said, gesturing to the papers. My lawyers have everything ready. The divorce will be finalized in 3 weeks. I have connections, judges who owe me favors. You will receive a settlement of $5 million. The house in Beacon Hill is yours. Your medical expenses will be covered for 1 year through a trust I am establishing. After that, you are on your own. 1 year, Catherine said quietly. Luca, treatment could take 18 months or longer. What happens if I am still sick after a year? Then you use the $5 million to figure it out, Luca said without sympathy. That is more than generous, Catherine. Most women in your position would get nothing. Most women in my position, Catherine said, tears now streaming down her face, are not being abandoned by their husbands the day after a cancer diagnosis. Most women in my position have partners who actually meant their wedding vows. Vows are just words, Luca said dismissively. They do not change reality. And the reality is that I want a different life than the one I will have if I stay married to you. I want a wife who is healthy, who can appear with me at events without people whispering about cancer, who can give me children before it is too late. We could have had children, Catherine said. I wanted children. You were always the one who said we should wait. And now I am grateful we did, Luca replied. Can you imagine how much more complicated this would be if we had kids? This way is clean. You get your settlement, your medical coverage, the house. I get my freedom. Everyone moves on. How can you be this cold? Catherine asked, searching his face for any sign of the man she had married, the man who had once told her she was the most important thing in his world. How can you look at me and feel nothing? I feel inconvenienced, Luca said honestly. I feel frustrated that this happened right when I was preparing to expand my operations into New York. I feel annoyed that I have to deal with divorce proceedings when I have more important things to focus on. But sympathy? Guilt? No, Catherine. I do not feel those things. I never have. He set down his glass and walked toward the door. You have 48 hours to pack your personal belongings, he said. Movers will come for the rest and put it in storage until you are settled in Beacon Hill. My lawyer will contact you tomorrow about signing the papers. I suggest you do not fight this. You will lose, and it will only delay the inevitable. And just like that, he left, walked out of their bedroom, out of their marriage, out of her life, as easily as someone leaving a business meeting that had run too long. Catherine heard the front door close, heard his car start in the garage below, heard the engine fade into the distance. And then there was only silence, broken by the sound of her own Kringa sound so raw and desperate it did not even sound human. What you are about to hear is going to shock you. Stay with me, because the final twist is something nobody could have predicted. Not even the doctors who thought they knew the truth. This is the story of Catherine Romano, and it is the story of how a powerful mafia boss divorced his wife the day after her cancer diagnosis, how a woman faced the fight of her life, completely alone, and how a revelation from her doctor changed everything anyone thought they knew. This story will teach you a powerful lesson. Never abandon someone in their darkest hour because you have no idea what the real story is. Never assume you know someone's future based on a diagnosis. And never underestimate what a woman will discover when she is fighting for her life. Alone. Where are you watching from right now? Are you alone? What time is it there? Because you need to hear every single word of what happens next. Kindly hit the subscribe button now. If you have ever been abandoned when you needed someone most, if anyone has ever shown you that their love came with conditions, this story is for you. Stay with me, because what the doctor revealed will leave you absolutely speechless. Catherine Romano, born Catherine Hayes, had grown up in a working-class neighborhood in South Boston. The daughter of a firefighter and a nurse, good people who worked honest jobs and raised their daughter to value integrity above everything else. Her childhood was filled with love, even though money was always tight. Her parents stretching every dollar to make sure Catherine and her 2 younger brothers had what they needed. Catherine was bright, graduating from Boston College with a degree in social work, planning a career helping families in crisis, wanting to give back to communities like the one she grew up in. At 26, she was working at a nonprofit that provided services to domestic violence survivors when she met Luca Marchetti at a fundraising event the organization was hosting. Luca was 35, already established as one of Boston's most powerful and dangerous men. Officially, he owned a chain of high-end restaurants and real estate development companies. Unofficially, everyone knew the Marchetti family had deep roots in organized crime, connections that went back 3 generations to Sicily. Luca was magnetic, commanding, the kind of man who walked into a room and immediately became its center of gravity. He approached Catherine at the fundraiser, introduced himself, made a substantial donation to her organization. Then he asked her to dinner. Catherine refused at first, knowing who he was, understanding the danger. But Luca was persistent, charming when he chose to be, and he wore down her resistance over weeks of flowers delivered to her office, handwritten notes that were surprisingly thoughtful, phone calls where he actually listened when she talked about her work. Their courtship lasted 8 months before Luca proposed, presenting her with a ring that cost more than Catherine's annual salary, asking her to marry him in front of both their families at a restaurant he had rented out for the evening. Catherine's parents were terrified, begged her to reconsider, warned her that men like Luca Marchetti did not change. But Catherine was in love, convinced that Luca's feelings for her were genuine, that she was special enough to be the exception to everything people said about him. They were married in a lavish ceremony at a historic church in the North End. 400 guests watching them exchange vows, Catherine in a custom Vera Wang gown, Luca in a suit flown in from Milan. The reception was at a luxury hotel, champagne flowing freely, a band that had flown in from New York, everything perfect and expensive and overwhelming. Catherine's parents attended but looked uncomfortable the entire time, surrounded by Luca's associates who radiated danger despite their expensive clothes and polite manners. The first 8 years of marriage were complicated but manageable. Luca was controlling, demanding complete loyalty, requiring Catherine to quit her job because he wanted her available whenever he needed her. He was possessive, not liking when other men looked at her, making his displeasure known in ways that bordered on threatening, but he was also protective in his own way, generous with money, and when they were alone, he could show moments of tenderness that made Catherine believe their marriage was built on something real. They tried for children, but Catherine struggled with fertility issues, enduring 2 miscarriages that left her emotionally devastated. Luca became increasingly distant after the second miscarriage, suggesting they stop trying, focus on other things. Catherine agreed reluctantly, heartbroken but trying to be understanding of his disappointment. Then came the day that changed everything. Catherine was in the shower when she felt the lump of hard mass in her right breast that had not been there before. Terror flooded through her immediately. She made an appointment with her doctor, trying not to panic, telling herself it was probably nothing. The mammogram led to an ultrasound, which led to a biopsy, which led to a phone call 3 days later that shattered her world. Mrs. Marchetti, her oncologist, Dr. Jennifer Walsh, said gently over the phone, "I am very sorry to tell you this, but your biopsy results show invasive ductal carcinoma. It is stage 3 breast cancer. We need to schedule an appointment immediately to discuss treatment options." Catherine sat in her kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, unable to breathe, unable to think. She was 35 years old, healthy, took care of herself. This was not supposed to happen. "How bad is it?" she managed to ask. "It is serious but treatable," Dr. Walsh said. With aggressive chemotherapy, followed by surgery and radiation, the 5-year survival rate is approximately 6 to 5%. I know that sounds frightening, but many women beat this, Mrs. Marchetti. We will fight this together. Catherine made an appointment for the following day, then sat in her kitchen for hours, trying to process what she had just learned. When Luca came home that evening, she told him everything, explaining the diagnosis, the treatment plan, trying to stay calm even though terror was clawing at her chest. She expected him to be shocked, worried, maybe even afraid for her. Instead, Luca went completely still, his face unreadable. Then he walked to his office without a word and closed the door. Catherine sat alone at the dining table for 3 hours, waiting for him to come out, to say something, to show any sign that he cared. His wife had just been told she had cancer. The next morning, divorce papers were delivered to their home by Luca's lawyer. 24 hours after receiving the worst news of her life, Catherine was being discarded like a broken appliance, thrown away because she had become inconvenient, abandoned by the man who had promised to love her in sickness and in health. The divorce was finalized in 3 weeks, expedited through judges who owed Luca favors, pushed through with a speed that felt like violence. Catherine was too shocked, too devastated, too overwhelmed by her diagnosis to fight. She signed the papers Luca's lawyers put in front of her, accepted the $5 million settlement and the house in Beacon Hill, watched her marriage dissolve while her world crumbled around her. 2 weeks after the divorce was final, Catherine started chemotherapy. The treatments were beyond brutal. The nausea was so severe she could barely keep down water. The fatigue was crushing, leaving her unable to get out of bed most days. Her hair fell out in clumps, coming out in her hands every time she touched it, until she finally just shaved her head completely, unable to bear watching herself lose it piece by piece. She went through treatment alone. Her parents were both dead now, her father from a heart attack 3 years ago, her mother from a stroke 6 months later. Her brothers had their own families, their own problems, lived across the country, and could not drop everything to care for a sister going through cancer treatment. Her friends had slowly disappeared during her marriage to Luca, her world shrinking until he was the center of everything. Now he was gone, and she was facing the fight of her life with no support, no partner, no one to hold her hand during infusion appointments or help her to the bathroom when she was too weak to walk on her own. Catherine hired a nurse, a kind woman named Patricia, who came 3 days a week to check on her, help with basic tasks, make sure she was taking her medications. But Patricia was an employee, not family, not a friend. The rest of the time, Catherine was alone in the Beacon Hill house Luca had given her, a beautiful prison where she suffered in isolation. 6 months into treatment, Catherine was unrecognizable from the woman she used to be. She had lost 50 pounds, her body skeletal, her skin gray and papery. The chemotherapy had destroyed the cancer, but it had also destroyed her, leaving her so weak she could barely make it from her bedroom to the bathroom without having to rest. The dark circles under her eyes were permanent, carved into her face like scars. She looked like she was dying, felt like she was dying. Some days wished she was dying, because the pain and exhaustion were beyond enduring. Her medical bills were astronomical despite Luca's trust fund. The coverage was good, but it did not cover everything. Did not cover all the medications she needed, the follow-up scans, the additional treatments her doctors recommended. Catherine watched her settlement money drain away at a terrifying rate, watched $5 million evaporate as medical expenses piled up faster than she could track them. She tried to contact Luca once, 6 months after their divorce, when the trust fund coverage was about to run out, and she had medical bills she could not pay. She called his office, left messages, finally got through to his assistant, who informed her coldly that Mr. Marchetti had fulfilled all his legal obligations and would not be extending any additional financial support. Catherine was on her own. 8 months after her diagnosis, Catherine was broke, alone, and barely surviving in the house that was supposed to be her consolation prize. The cancer was in remission according to her latest scans, but she was so damaged from treatment that she could not imagine ever being healthy again. She had no money left for the follow-up care she needed, no way to pay for medications that were keeping her alive, no resources to continue fighting. She was sitting in her kitchen one morning, staring at a pile of medical bills she could not pay, when her phone rang. It was Dr. Walsh. "Mrs. Marchetti," the doctor said, her voice strange, careful. "I need you to come to my office today, if possible. There is something we need to discuss about your case. Something important." More bad news, Catherine thought. The cancer was probably back. Or maybe her kidneys were failing from the chemo, or her heart was damaged. There was always more bad news. "Can you tell me over the phone?" she asked, too exhausted to make the trip to the medical center. "No," Dr. Walsh said firmly. "This needs to be discussed in person. Please, Mrs. Marchetti. It is urgent that we talk as soon as possible. Catherine dragged herself to the medical center that afternoon, taking an Uber because she was too weak to drive, wrapped in clothes that hung on her skeletal frame. Dr. Walsh was waiting for her in a consultation room, her expression grave, her hands clasped tightly on her desk in a way that made Catherine's stomach twist with dread. "Mrs. Marchetti," Dr. Walsh began, her voice shaking slightly. "What I am about to tell you is going to be very difficult to hear. There has been—" She paused, searching for words. "There has been a catastrophic error with your medical records." "What kind of error?" Catherine asked, fear flooding through her. "Your biopsy results," Dr. Walsh said slowly. "The ones that showed invasive ductal carcinoma. They were—" She took a breath. "Incorrect." Catherine stared at her, unable to process the words. "What do you mean, incorrect?" "There was a mix-up in our pathology lab," Dr. Walsh explained, tears forming in her eyes. "Your biopsy sample was switched with another patient's sample. The results you received, showing stage 3 breast cancer, those results belonged to someone else. Your actual biopsy showed a benign fibrous mass, common, harmless, requiring no treatment beyond monitoring." The room tilted. Catherine gripped the armrests of her chair, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might explode. "I never had cancer," she whispered. "No," Dr. Walsh confirmed, tears now streaming down her face. "You never had cancer, Mrs. Marchetti. I am so profoundly, catastrophically sorry. The chemotherapy, the radiation, all the treatment you endured, it was completely unnecessary. You were never sick." Catherine could not breathe, could not think, could not process what she was hearing. "I destroyed my body for nothing," she said, her voice barely audible. "I lost my marriage, my health, my entire life, because of a mistake." "Yes," Dr. Walsh said. "And Mrs. Marchetti, there is more. The patient whose results you received, her name was Sarah Bennett. She had stage 3 breast cancer. But because she received your results, showing a benign mass, she did not seek treatment. By the time the error was discovered, her cancer had progressed to stage 4. She died 2 weeks ago. I am so sorry." "A woman died," Catherine said, shock layering upon shock. "A woman died because she got my results and thought she was healthy." "Yes," Dr. Walsh said. "This error cost Sarah Bennett her life, and it destroyed yours. The hospital is conducting a full investigation. We are prepared to accept full liability. But Mrs. Marchetti, you need to know the chemotherapy you received has caused permanent damage. Your heart has been weakened. Your kidneys show significant impairment. Your bone marrow—" She trailed off. "We need to run extensive tests to determine the full extent of the harm." Catherine stood up on shaking legs. "I need to leave," she said. "Mrs. Marchetti, please," Dr. Walsh said. "We need to discuss your legal options, the hospital's liability." "I need to leave," Catherine repeated, and she walked out of that office and into the bright afternoon sun, her mind empty of everything except the crushing weight of what she had just learned. She went home to her empty house, and she sat in the dark for hours, unable to cry, unable to feel anything except a numbness so profound it felt like she was already dead. She had endured 9 months of hell, had destroyed her body with chemotherapy she never needed, had lost her marriage and her future because of a clerical error in a pathology lab, and Luca had abandoned her based on a lie, had thrown her away because of a diagnosis that was never real. 3 days later, Catherine called Luca's office. For the first time in 9 months, he actually took her call. "What do you want, Catherine?" he said, his voice impatient. "I thought we were done." "I need to see you," Catherine said, her voice flat and emotionless. "In person, today." "I am busy," Luca said. "Whatever you need to discuss can be handled through our lawyers." "I never had cancer," Catherine said. "The diagnosis was wrong. There was a mistake at the hospital. I was never sick, Luca." Silence on the other end of the line. "Then, what are you talking about?" "My biopsy results were switched with another patient," Catherine explained mechanically. "I had a benign mass. She had cancer. I got her diagnosis. She got mine. I spent 9 months destroying my body with chemotherapy I did not need, while she died from cancer she did not know she had." More silence. Catherine could hear Luca breathing, could almost feel him calculating, processing, deciding how this information affected him. "That is unfortunate," he finally said. "Unfortunate," Catherine repeated. "Luca, you divorced me because of a diagnosis that was wrong. You threw me away, left me to suffer alone, destroyed our marriage because you thought I was dying, and I was never even sick. None of that changes my decision," Luca said coldly. "I made a choice based on the information I had at the time. The fact that the information was incorrect is not my responsibility." "Not your responsibility," Catherine said, something cold and hard forming in her chest. "I lost everything because of that mistake. My health, my fertility, my future. And you lost nothing. I lost a year dealing with divorce proceedings when I should have been focused on business, Luca said. So do not act like I came out of this unscathed. You lost a year, Catherine said quietly. I lost my entire life. If you are looking for an apology or sympathy, you are wasting your time, Luca said. What happened to you is tragic, but it has nothing to do with me anymore. I have moved on, Catherine. I have a fiancé now, younger, healthier, someone who can actually give me children. I suggest you move on as well. Who is she? Catherine asked. That is not your concern, Luca replied. Look, I am sorry for what happened to you, truly, but I cannot change the past, and I am not going to let your situation affect my future. We are done, Catherine. Accept that and let me go. Let you go, Catherine said. You are the one who left me, Luca. You do not get to ask me to let you go. Then do not, Luca said. Hold on to your bitterness if it makes you feel better. But do not contact me again. My lawyers will send you a formal cease and desist if you do. He hung up. Catherine sat holding the phone, staring at nothing, feeling something shift inside her, something dark and cold and utterly without mercy. If Luca thought this was over, if he thought he could just walk away from what he had done, he was wrong. Catherine Romano might be broken, might be damaged beyond repair, but she was not defeated, and she was not done. The lawsuit against the hospital took 18 months. The case was straightforward, the negligence undeniable. A pathology lab technician named Marcus Webb had deliberately switched samples, though his motivation remained unclear. The hospital settled for $25 million, admitting full liability, implementing new safety protocols, firing everyone involved in the error. Catherine used some of the settlement money for ongoing medical treatment. The chemotherapy had caused permanent damage that would require monitoring and medication for the rest of her life. She would never have children. The treatment had destroyed her fertility completely. She would never be fully healthy again. The damage too extensive, too profound. But Catherine also used the money for something else. She hired investigators, lawyers, forensic accountants. She started asking questions about Luca, about his finances, about the exact timing of their divorce, and she discovered something that changed everything. 6 months before her diagnosis, Luca had taken out life insurance policies on Catherine, multiple policies with different companies, totaling $15 million. The policies all had a specific clause. They would pay out in the event of Catherine's death from terminal illness within 3 years of diagnosis. Catherine stared at the insurance documents her investigator had uncovered, her mind processing the implications. Luca had insured her life for $15 million. 6 months before she was diagnosed with cancer. If she had died from the cancer she never actually had, died from the unnecessary treatment, Luca would have collected $15 million. She dug deeper. She found bank records showing Luca had paid Marcus Webb, the pathology technician who switched the samples, $250,000, 3 days before Catherine's biopsy results came back. She found emails between Luca and Marcus discussing the project and ensuring it would be untraceable. She found evidence of an affair between Luca and a woman named Valentina Ross that had been going on for 2 years before Catherine's diagnosis. The picture became horrifyingly clear. Luca had paid Marcus Webb to give Catherine a false cancer diagnosis. He had hoped the unnecessary chemotherapy would kill her so he could collect the life insurance money and marry his mistress. When Catherine survived longer than expected, Luca divorced her to distance himself from the crime, leaving her alone to suffer and hopefully die before anyone discovered the truth. Luca had not just abandoned his sick wife, he had tried to murder her, had deliberately destroyed her body, her health, her life, for $15 million in insurance money. Catherine sat in her house, surrounded by the evidence of her husband's attempted murder, and she felt something she had not felt in a long time. Not sadness, not grief, not even anger, just cold, calculating determination. Luca Marchetti thought he was untouchable, thought his power and connections made him invincible, thought he could literally get away with murder. He was about to learn how wrong he was. Catherine went to the FBI with everything she had uncovered. Bank records, emails, insurance policies, testimony from hospital employees about Marcus Webb's suspicious behavior. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, devastating. The FBI opened an investigation immediately. Within 6 months, they had built a case against Luca Marchetti for conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, and a dozen other charges. Marcus Webb, facing life in prison, took a plea deal and testified against Luca, explaining in detail how Luca had paid him to switch Catherine's biopsy results with cancer results from another patient, how the plan was for Catherine to die from unnecessary treatment so Luca could collect insurance money and marry his mistress. Luca was arrested at his wedding to Valentina Ross. Federal agents walked into the ceremony at a luxury hotel, handcuffed him in front of 300 guests, and led him away while his bride screamed and his associates watched in shock. The images were on every news channel within hours. Powerful Boston mobster arrested for trying to murder his wife with a fake cancer diagnosis. The trial lasted 6 weeks. Catherine testified for 3 days, describing in devastating detail what she had endured, how Luca had abandoned her, how the unnecessary treatment had destroyed her body, how she had discovered his conspiracy. The jury was visibly moved, several members crying as Catherine explained how she would never have children because of chemotherapy she never needed, how her heart and kidneys were permanently damaged, how at 37 years old, she had the body of a woman twice her age. Luca's lawyers argued he was being framed, that the evidence was circumstantial, that someone was trying to destroy him. But Marcus Webb's testimony was too specific, too detailed. The bank transfers were too obvious, the timing of the insurance policies too suspicious. After 2 days of deliberation, the jury found Luca Marchetti guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to 40 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole. At the sentencing hearing, Catherine was given the opportunity to address the court. She stood slowly, still weak, still bearing the physical scars of what Luca had done to her. She looked at him sitting at the defense table, his expensive suit replaced with prison orange, his arrogance finally cracked, fear showing in his eyes for the first time. "You gave me a death sentence," Catherine said, her voice steady and clear. "You paid someone to tell me I had cancer, hoping the treatment would kill me so you could collect life insurance and marry your mistress. When I did not die fast enough, you divorced me and left me alone to suffer. You destroyed my body, my fertility, my future. You made me believe I was dying when I was healthy. You murdered the woman I used to be, and you did it all for money." She paused, letting her words settle over the silent courtroom. "But you failed, Luca. I am still alive, broken, damaged beyond repair, but alive. And you are going to spend the rest of your life in a cage, thinking about what you did, thinking about the woman you tried to murder, thinking about the empire you lost because of your greed. You will die in prison, Luca, alone, forgotten, while I will live every day knowing I destroyed the man who tried to destroy me." Luca said nothing. He was led away in chains, his face finally showing the fear and desperation Catherine had felt for 9 months while she suffered alone, while she thought she was dying, while the man who promised to love her was actually trying to kill her. Catherine walked out of that courtroom and into the rest of her life, knowing that justice had been served, but understanding that justice could not heal what had been broken. She was 37 years old, with permanent damage that would never fully heal, unable to have the children she had dreamed of, living with pain and limitations that would last the rest of her life. But she was alive, and Luca Marchetti, the man who had tried to murder her for insurance money, would die in prison. That had to be enough. 5 years after Luca's conviction, Catherine stood in the office of the nonprofit she had founded, an organization that helped women escape abusive relationships and supported cancer patients through treatment. The walls were covered with photos of women the organization had helped, success stories that proved healing was possible, even when it felt impossible. Catherine's body would never fully recover from the unnecessary treatment. She still needed medication daily. She still had appointments with cardiologists and nephrologists to monitor the damage. She still looked older than her 42 years. Her hair that had grown back was thin and gray, her face marked by what she had endured. But she had built something from the ashes of what Luca destroyed. She had taken the settlement money and the insurance payout and created something that mattered, something that helped people, something that gave meaning to her suffering. Her phone rang. It was her lawyer. "Mrs. Marchetti," he said. "I wanted to inform you that Luca Marchetti died this morning. Heart attack in prison. He was 49 years old." Catherine felt nothing. No satisfaction. No grief. Just a distant acknowledgement that the man who tried to kill her was finally gone. "Thank you for letting me know," she said. She hung up and looked out her office window at the Boston skyline, at the city where she had suffered and survived, and built a new life from nothing. Luca was dead, and Catherine was alive. In the end, that was all that mattered. This is the story of how a Mafia boss divorced his wife after her cancer diagnosis, how he had actually paid to give her that false diagnosis, hoping it would kill her, and how the truth revealed destroyed him completely. Luca Marchetti learned that evil does not always win, that even the most powerful men can fall, that trying to murder your wife for insurance money is the kind of evil that eventually catches up with you. If this story reminded you that abandoning someone in their darkest hour reveals who you truly are, that greed can drive people to unthinkable evil, that the truth always comes out eventually, then you understand what Catherine's story means. Hit that like button if you believe in justice, if you think people who harm the vulnerable deserve to pay, if you know that survival sometimes means living with broken pieces and finding strength anyway. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, someone who has been abandoned, someone who stayed strong through unimaginable pain. And subscribe, because we have more stories coming that prove evil does not always win, that the powerless can destroy the powerful when truth comes to light, that karma is real, and sometimes it wears prison orange and dies alone in a cell. This is Best Heart Stories, where every story reminds you that your worth is not determined by how others treat you, but by your ability to survive what they put you through. Catherine Romano was given a death sentence by the man who promised to love her. She survived, she rebuilt, she won, and he lost everything. Never let anyone make you believe you are disposable. Never trust someone who abandons you when you are vulnerable. And never underestimate the power of truth to destroy even the most carefully constructed lies. Thank you for staying until the end. You are stronger than anyone who ever tried to break you. Remember that. I will see you in the next story.